Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the First Universalist Society in Franklin. I'm Louise Marcoux, a member of the Worship Committee, and I'm glad that we're together. As we gather this morning, I hope you find peace, connection, encouragement, and inspiration. Wherever you have been this week, whether your heart is light or heavy, whoever you are, whoever you love, be present and welcome. If you are visiting with us this morning, we're especially glad that you're here. Welcome. Please take a moment to sign our guest book in the foyer or our virtual guest book online, and you'll find the link in the chat. Please gather after service for snacks and coffee in the Fellowship Cafe or stick around on Zoom for a little while to chat. Our worship this morning will be led by a member of this congregation, Drew Bogner. In addition to being a member of the Worship Committee, Drew brings with him 20 years of experience as president of Molloy University, where he still works with doctoral students of education in the area of diversity, inclusion, and equity. His sermon today will offer us a glimpse into 3 chapters of his soon-to-be-published book, co-written with Robert Scott, another college president. It's called Letters to Students: What It Means to Be a College Graduate, and which, as you might imagine, is not so much about preparing for a career as it is about preparing for life. So, welcome back to the pulpit, Drew. And now, let's join our hearts and minds together as we gather for worship.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So as most of us know, our bodies are made primarily of water. So in the 1990s, Masaru Emoto decided that he would take a look at how various impurities or different things that end up in water might affect the human body. So he wanted to study the microscopic impact of various kinds of entities on water. So he gathered up water from different sources. He took a big walk-in freezer and he put in microscopic imaging, and he would take the water, freeze the water, and then look at the crystalline structure. We kind of know what a crystalline structure of water looks like, and if you don't remember, all you have to do is look behind me. It looks a lot like snow. So I wanted to share just a little bit of what he found. So on the monitors, you're going to see the first slide, and this is from left to right, municipal water sources from Paris, London, and Tokyo. You'll notice it doesn't look like a regular crystalline structure because it is highly distorted. That speaks to the impurities. Second slide, please. Not every municipal water source is like this, though. The top one is from Washington, D.C., and the lower one is from New York City, who have absolutely pristine municipal water sources. So after looking at these, they thought, well, this is a molecular structure, so would waves of different kinds and forms impact the structure of water, which means it might impact our water on our bodies? So they looked at that. Next slide, please. Oops, I think that's, is that it? No, go back, can you go back? I don't know what the deal is there. Okay, anyway, sorry. Must not be in the right order, I'm sorry about that. So we might get to that one in a minute. So after that, they did that, one of the members of their research team decided that perhaps music, which has a hormonal frequency variation, would that impact water? And what you're looking at here is Vivaldi's Four Seasons that was played to water. And it goes like this, from left, from top to bottom, spring, summer, and then the right column is autumn, winter. So what about pop music? Next one, please. This is the Beatles, Yesterday. And what about heavy metal? Next one, please. Ah, no real crystalline structure, right? Yeah, yeah, I heard that. That comment behind me was no wonder why I don't like it. And then one of the researchers said, and they thought, voice, when we speak, it has a frequency as well. What would happen if we expose water to different things we say and how we say them? Next one. So this is thank you in Japanese. And they looked at saying thank you in every single different language you could find. I don't know how many, but they did probably 40, 50 different languages, and it all looks something like this. But what about if you say to water other more negative things? Next slide. So this is a translation of you fool, derogatory, in Japanese, in the top, English in the middle, and the bottom one says, you make me sick, I will kill you, in Japanese. So the point being that words, it seems, do matter and they impact us. If you're interested in seeing more about this, it's called Messages from Water, and I can give you the reference, Dr. Emoto. Please join us in singing hymn number 360, Here We Are Gathered.
Every Sunday morning, we share a centering ritual with Unitarian Universalists around the world, the lighting of a chalice. Here are words by Maureen Kilornan. Love is the aspiration, the spirit that moves and inspires this faith we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share. And now, please remain seated and join me in singing our unison affirmation, the words of which are printed in the front cover of your gray hymnal.
Good morning. My name is Diana Testney, and I am the Director of Religious Education here at the First Universalist Society in Franklin. And I would like to invite children, if they would like to come and sit in the front, you can. And I'm going to have some questions for you, and also for the grown-ups. Look, it's snowing outside. How many of you like that snow? How many of you are looking outside and going, oh no, oh dear, oh bummer. Hi Griselda, you want to sit over? You can sit there, you can sit anywhere you want. You can sit by Magnolia or you can sit there, it's fine. So some people really like snow and some people don't like snow. And today I knew that Mr. Drew was going to be talking about water and what it looks like under a microscope. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about a man who much, much earlier was interested in looking at water, specifically looking at snow and snowflakes. His name was Wilson Bentley, and he was born in 1865 on a farm in Vermont. There's a lot of snow in Vermont. How many of you have been there and know about the snow in Vermont? Yeah, lots of snow. So Wilson was, in my opinion, both an artist and a scientist. He could see beauty in the world, and he wanted to share that beauty with others. And he was curious and observant about the world and wanted to know all about it. So he was both of those things at the same time. Artists and scientists share many qualities. They need to be hard workers. They need to be observant, and they need to be unafraid to try new things and learn from them, because often the learning comes when the thing they try doesn't work out. So you have to be willing to keep going and keep asking your question. Wilson Bentley saw that snowflakes were not just cold and wet, although they are that. They were, to him, beautiful and complicated, and he was the one who discovered that they're all unique. He wanted to look at them under a microscope to see them better. So remember, this was in a time when nobody had done that before. And photography was a brand new science. So he looked at the snow. Other people in Vermont are just walking through the snow. He's looking at the snow and thinking, what is this? Why does it look like this? What happens if it freezes under different temperatures? What if? I want to see it better. I want to look at it better, right? So he wanted to look at them, but whenever he would try to catch snowflakes and try to take pictures of them, what would happen to them, do you think? Yeah, Eva? They would melt, right? So he couldn't keep them around long enough. They were so ephemeral that he couldn't look at them. So he developed a technique, working outside in the very cold weather. He developed a way to capture snowflakes on pieces of black velvet, and he would take pictures of them very quickly before they melted. And when he photographed them, he was amazed at how beautiful they are. Have any of you seen pictures of snowflakes? They're gorgeous, and they're all different. So he took, this is just as a history lesson, in January 1855, Wilson took the first photographs of snowflakes when he was just 20 years old. So he was quite young when he had this fascination, and he was working at it, which means he was probably thinking about this and working on it when he was the age that some of you are here. He was asking these questions. He spent the rest of his life studying snow and weather phenomena, making many contributions to our knowledge about different kinds of snow and how water behaves in different situations. So to Wilson Bentley, snowflakes were, this is how he described them, ice flowers, and ice crystals were tiny miracles of beauty. Now, when that's how you think about something, you see it in a different way, and your relationship to it is different than if you're thinking of it as, ugh, right? If that's how you're thinking of the thing and how you're speaking about it inside your head, you're going to have a different relationship with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about words later today. I was thinking about how, even just saying those words inside your head, but speaking them aloud has an effect on your relationship with the thing in nature. And I was thinking about how people who live in really snowy places have different words to describe different kinds of snow. It's not just snow. They have powdery snow, icy snow, wet and slick snow, good snowball making snow. You guys know what that kind of snow is like, right? You go outside and you go, oh yes! Or you go out and say, oh no, it doesn't stick together. It's not gonna work. So they have words to describe that. The words we use to describe our world affect not only our internal perception of the world, but they can have an effect on how we behave and relate to the world around us. Choosing language that is free of judgment can help us be more open-minded in our observations and help us notice things. So, pay attention to the way that you speak about the world, whether inside your head or with your voice. It's actually the most ordinary and everyday aspects of life that are the most filled with mystery, like the snowflakes. Please join me in singing the children to their class.
So I'd like to share with you a prayer or poem that I wrote in November of 2018 called The Pledge. I'm not going to ask you to pledge out loud, but if you want to do it in your mind, that would be great. Do you pledge that you will show respect to everyone regardless of any qualification, whether it be race, religion, gender, or sexual identification? Do you pledge that you will speak up against those who tear down others through derogatory remarks? Do you pledge that you will push back against hatred and divisiveness by performing daily acts of kindness? Do you pledge by your actions to actively promote civility? Do you pledge that you will not forward hurtful and damaging social media? Words matter. What you say or choose not to say builds the reality in which we live. If you lead with love, then we will have a world of love. If you bully and denigrate others, then we will have a world where this is the norm. Ask yourself the question, why were you born?
Good morning. I'm Jay Rafferty, Chair of the Stewardship Committee at FUSF. I'm pleased to be here as we gather on this Sunday to hear Drew Bogner talk about the power of words to shape the behavior of ourselves and others. We're in the month of January where the signs of winter, such as snow, cold days, have been mixed with times of rain and wind. Coming out of the holiday season, FUSF has hosted special fundraising events this month, which included the popular Puzzle Palooza tournament and sale, and a concert last evening by the band Second Son. We have 2 months of winter ahead, but there's lots of energy here at FUSF. The stewardship team is working hard on our plans for the annual pledge drive, which will begin in early March. The board recently announced we'll have a third year of transition from 2024 to 2025 with Reverend Bev Waring. We increased funding for FUSF during our last pledge drive, and we want to continue this momentum with your support as we prepare to embark upon the search for a settled minister in the year ahead. I hope this service will remind you of what attracts you to FUSF as we listen to new music from the Universal Singers, hear inspiring words from the pulpit, and can meet with other members after service at the Fellowship Cafe. In order to continue the work of FUSF, I invite you to make a contribution this morning. You can do this by going to the FUSF website and clicking on Give, which will bring up the Tithely app on your phone or computer to make electronic donations. Alternatively, you can send a check in the mail to the FUSF treasurer at the Meeting House address. For those of you in the sanctuary, you can add your contribution as the offering plates are passed. Thank you for your generosity.
So I want to tell you that what Diana was talking about, Karen and I actually visited that place in Vermont, and we have hanging in our house a photographic copy from the original negative that was taken in the late 1800s. It's a fascinating place to go. You can see the original contraption that he built to photograph it. It's really a pretty neat place to see. So I want to talk about the power of words. So you saw the slides, just a small selection. So how did I first come across that work by Dr. Emoto? So when I was president, I would teach every third semester or so, and the course I taught most frequently was History of Modern Japan. It was part of the Global Studies program, and Karen and I traveled with groups of students 4 different times in Japan. Sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the January intersession. And one time in January, we stayed at a Buddhist monastery on Mount Koya. It was snowing, it was very cold, and the only source of heat in our room, our soji papered doored room, was a little electric blanket of sorts. So that night, we had a presentation by the head monk, and he apologized for the fact that one of the heaters wasn't working in the common room, and I could see his breath in the projector as he talked about the power of words. And he showed some of these images, and he talked about how what you say really matters, and what you say to other people impacts them and impacts the world. It impacts things like water, and it impacts things like plants. Do any of you talk to plants? Many people do. And you know, if you say to the plant, this is what the monk said, if you say to the plant, "What a beautiful plant you are. How are you today?" It does quite well. Karen's orchids do quite well when she talks to them. But if you say to the plant, what a dreadful little plant you are, you're all spindly, and you haven't done anything, you're not growing. If you don't really get your act together, I'm going to throw you out. The plant does not do any better. You see, he talked about, words have power because they can carry intent. And when you look at water, if we say things to water, it carries intent as well. And he showed us those photographs of that. Now, I can't tell you whether Dr. Emoto's work, that's been published in all kinds of very prestigious scientific journals, by the way, and a member of the congregation, Barbara, sings in the choir with us, she knew his work. I can't tell you how scientifically valid it is, but I can tell you from my own experience, and you probably can too, that words do impact others, and they do impact the world. Words can, when uttered, serve like a violent projectile that penetrates another person to the core. What we say and how we say it can change the whole tenor of a room. You've seen that. Our words can also be a soothing balm. They can elicit laughter or show that we care. One year I was fortunate to have on campus Mr. Paul Rusesabagina, whose heroic acts inspired the movie Hotel Rwanda. I don't know if you've seen that. In 1994, Mr. Paul Rusesabagina was the manager of a luxury hotel in Rwanda. And when terrorism and mass executions engulfed the whole country, leading to the deaths of 800,000 individuals in 100 days, he sheltered in his hotel 1,268 people, saving them from almost certain murder. Afterwards, he came to try to find some understanding of how his neighbors and his countrymen could turn on each other, brandishing machetes to maim and kill the person across the street or children. And also looking back, he wanted to know how he, in his own words, an ordinary man, could save those almost 1,300 people simply through the power of words. The answer to both of these things had to do with what is said and how you say it. Words of anger, prejudice, were used by the newly empowered ruling group to fan old resentments between Hutus and Tutsis. The words were put out, as he said, by radio station announcers as a major cause of violence. There were explicit exhortations for ordinary citizens to break into homes, kill their neighbors. The avalanche of words celebrating racial supremacy and encouraging people to do their duty created an alternate reality where the insane was made to seem normal. Does that sound a little bit like today? It does. He was convinced that the only thing that saved those people in the hotel were words, not the liquor and money he used to bribe the rebels or the UN that arrived. If you see in the movie, they arrive very late. But ordinary words directed against the darkness. Words are powerful. We know this from our own experience. There are hurtful words, for example, words of hate, demeaning words, words that divide, and words that twist and bend the truth. But there are also words of good, words that enliven, words that calm, words that connect and bind and bridge divides, building up rather than tearing down. The words we use in a conversation with another can have a real effect. But so too are the words we put into text. In fact, these words might have even more impact, for these words have a staying power. There's a visible record of them, and they can be looked at time and time again or forwarded to others. What we type in a moment of anger can have a lasting effect, exhibiting a life well after our anger has subsided. Mr. Rusesabagina observed that what's contained in the power of words, words of anger, words of prejudice, words of hatred, can be used, or they can make a difference in the lives of other people. We hold power in the words we use. We are consumers and practitioners of word usage. And we have some knowledge of their impact on others. As such, we're responsible for what we say. We are stewards of word usage, and we need to give some conscious thought to the words we choose to use before we utter them and inject them into a conversation. It seems like, at least to me, that today we live in a world where words of anger, words of hate, words of prejudice, racism can and do lead to violence, or at least to mistrust, hate, and fear. It feels like at some times we cannot stem this rising tide of increasing divisiveness. Even if I am careful in my own choices of words, how do we respond to what others say or write or act upon? You can engage, and there are times when it seems you should, when it seems important to come to another's defense, when we need to ask the other to take it down a notch, or point out that their language and behavior is inappropriate. But you all know what happens if you do engage. And of course, there are times when we're dealing with strangers, and we can decide whether to engage or not and walk away. And I'm not judging that at all. But many of these encounters happen with people we know. Family members, longtime friends, co-workers, people we rely upon to perform services with us and for us, like the person who comes to fix your furnace, cut your hair, repair your car, people you have some relationship to. So I want to talk about some strategies that we can use in those situations. One strategy, and I'm not necessarily advocating for this, is just to end the relationship. I know people who have done that now. That is much more common. Most people I talk to have probably done that with someone. And remember the water that happens when it's exposed to all that negativity, it gets distorted, and that can happen to you. And so sometimes an act of self-preservation, people do that. Now that I'm retired, mostly retired, I have more latitude to do that. I can actually walk away from people. But, you know, that has its own consequences if I start going down that road. And I don't like those consequences of what it does to me. I didn't have that luxury when I was president of a university. I had tenured faculty, alumni, donors, important and necessary relationships in the community to maintain. I also have a family and old friendships whose continuance seems worth the effort. So here's some strategies. First strategy, treat people the way I would want them to act and assume good intentions. When I became president of the university, where I served for 20 years, other finalist was the interim president. And she had worked at the college for many years, and she had her detractors and her supporters. Makes sense. When you work somewhere for a long time and you do some tough kinds of tasks, that happens. On my first day in the office, my executive assistant handed me a letter. In it, she said, contained the names of those individuals who supported the other candidate. I handed her the letter back. She said, I thought you should know what you're up against. So I handed her the letter back. I didn't open it. And I said, I don't want to know who's on that list. I'm going to treat every person as if they will support the college, support the mission, and support me until proven otherwise by their actions, not words. One of my central beliefs is that 95 to 99% of the people come to work wanting to do a good job. They don't wake up in the morning and say, you know, I think I'm going to go in and make everyone else's day miserable, and I'm going to be an obstacle. No, they don't do that. In fact, if they seem that way, it's probably because they have frustration for how their job is structured or through inefficient processes or something like that. So I believe the same is true, analogous, to how people approach life. I don't think most people wake up each day and wanting to be unhappy. But your worldview can become colored and tainted by emotions that weigh you down and make it very difficult to have a positive outlook. Just erodes that away. And this negative caustic energy that seems increasingly more pervasive, that's more the issue, and it's less about ignorance and intellectual malaise or intellectual laziness. I think it's more about emotion, a sense of loss, and fear of the unknown. So if I want them to be more open and more positive, I need to treat them with hope and positivity. So that's my first technique. Be positive, be hopeful, and assume good intentions. Now, I'm not being naive about this. That doesn't always work. So the second one is absorb, redirect, and find common ground. In addition to managing the university, the main job of president, and by extension their spouse or partner, is to manage relationships. Even the term tells you what it's about, right? The longer you work at the institution, the more relationships you have to manage. And as you can imagine, the personalities and their interests, political, religious, sociological points of view vary widely. So you become good at absorbing, redirecting, and finding common ground. Because finding common ground is really what it's all about if you want them to support and help the university. So when we engage in a conversation, we would first acknowledge them, absorb perhaps some odd or stereotypic concept, and then redirect them. I would remember that my job is not to change them. That would imply some lack of disrespect. But it was my job to help them to see another perspective about the power of education to transform diverse needs of society, or the communities we serve, or the larger persistent issues that we're tasked with solving. And I just want to remind you that no one conversation is ever going to change another person's perspective. That's kind of mere fantasy. It takes many conversations and many attempts at that. So I would remind myself that when I engage with people that I know already are in a different place, that in addition to trying to find ways to keep that relationship together, it's my goal to help them see possibilities and maybe nudge them along. So, absorb, acknowledge, redirect, and find common ground. Third one, stake out boundaries. Sometimes you know with some people that no matter what you attempt to do and how patient you are in the conversation, that it will probably go off the rails into a tangled mess. That, for example, is my case with my sister. I have one sibling. Sister, one sibling. She has political and religious views very different than mine. And one Christmas a few years ago, we had a very intense disagreement. So she's my only sibling, and after a month or so of ruminating, I decided that I would call her. I'm always the one that calls, by the way, just so you know that. I always get upset about this because we think that men don't do those things, right? Just so you know. So I called her, and I apologized. Remember, absorb, redirect. And I set out some boundaries for future discussions. We would not talk politics in the future. We could talk about family. We could reminisce. That's safe, usually. We could travel together. In fact, we started doing that again. And if it started to happen, I would call it out. And that strategy has worked well. And think about it this way, though. We do not share every part of ourselves with everybody anyway. So that part of politics, I'm okay in not sharing that, if that's what it takes for me to maintain that relationship. I know some of you have been doing that, right? Okay. So the last one I will share with you is speak the truth through actions, not just words. There are times when I will speak the truth directly to those people I think are in error and I think are wrong. But I've learned that I have to be careful how I do it. And the trick is to doing it without passing judgment. That's really what gets people upset. And assuming intent behind what they say and casting dispersions on their character or motives. So I think it's often just as important to think about how I act and what I do. So I'm going to talk with you about how I drive. So I used to talk a lot to the other drivers while I was driving. And Karen can tell you that I still do that today. But I don't do it as much, and I'm not as caustic as I used to be. So I used to say things like, move over, it's the fast lane. Boy, up here in New England and Massachusetts, people drive in the left lane all the time. Sorry, you don't know this? Okay. And I'll say, get out of the way and, get off your phone or whatever I'm saying. And then I saw a comedy routine on HBO where the comedian asks a simple question. Can you imagine what it would be like if we said out loud when we walk down a sidewalk what we say out loud when we drive? Things like, move over, buddy. I'm walking here. I lived in New York for quite a while, right? Put your grocery bag down and concentrate on where you're going. Get off your phone, all those kinds of things. So it started me thinking that I'm much more conscious about the other person when I'm walking. I'm paying attention to them. I am conscious of their needs. I can see who they are. Maybe they're having difficulty walking or they're distracted for a reason. I see all that. I can't see that in the car. So I started thinking, well, maybe there are reasons why they're driving this way. So maybe they're in a hurry because there's an emergency. And that's why they cut me off. Or maybe they're having a bad day and they are having difficulty concentrating. Or perhaps they're getting old like me and they just don't drive as well. Or maybe they approach it with trepidation. They hate driving, and I pass them, I see them with their hands on 10 and 4, and they're clutching the steering wheel so tight. The same can be said for the person who says all those things that are biting and unkind. I don't know the motivation behind what they're saying and how come they're saying it the way they are. Perhaps instead of engaging with equal veracity, I should respond with positive and kind words, like the manager of the hotel in Rwanda. That's how he saved the people. Or I could do things that indicate that I see them as a human being worthy of respect and worthy of attention and love. I can say things like, thank you. I can hold the door open for them. I can let them, if they're really frustrated and they're spilling that biting language at the clerk or the person that's helping them, I can let them go ahead. I can say, well, go ahead. Go ahead. I can tell you're frustrated. I'll go somewhere else. But do something that indicates that I see them as a person worthy of love and respect, and that might change how they see themselves and how they see that day. One word, one single word, one phrase can elicit a whole range of thoughts and emotions. And in this way, the monk was right, the Buddhist monk, Paul Rusesabagina was right. If I say, I love you, I respect you, I care about you, it's going to make a big difference than if I say the opposite. In a kind of an ironic sort of way, what we say starts to indicate the kind of person we are and the reputation we have. And we all know this. Because we have people that because of what they say, we think they're funny, or they're boring, or insightful, or caustic, and you get labeled that way. So if you don't want to do it for any of those other reasons, you need to think about what it says about you as a person. Words are very powerful. Individual words and phrases can impact others, but it can impact how you're seen, and it can impact how you feel about life too. The more negative you are, the more it builds up that toxicity in you and makes it harder for you to be generous and loving and kind. So what you say to others makes a difference. What you say to yourself about how you approach life also makes a big difference. So I want to talk about that for a couple of minutes. The words you choose to use to describe how you interact with the world will change how you live your life. Now I'm going to use two words as examples. The first is guest, and the second is pilgrim. So we all know what it means to be a guest. When a person comes and stays with you as a guest, you know, or when you're a guest in someone else's house, you know what it means. You know how to act, right? At least you should know how to act, right? It means that you're polite and thankful. You certainly don't walk around and touch everything and open drawers and take photos down for the wall and take little things and put it in your pocket. We all know we're not supposed to do that. So in 2022, I kept a nature journal. And to give me some context, I looked at other ones. And I found this one by Sue Hubble called A Country Year. And I took it with me to Hawaii. And in it, she asked a very simple question. Who owns the land? Is it me? Is it the monarch butterfly, the wild turkey, the deer, the squirrel? They've all been there generations before me, and they're going to be there generations after me. So who actually owns the land? Now that observation was evidently in my head when we were on Kauai, on the beach, and we watched these giant sea turtles, some 100 years old, come onto the beach. 10, 20, 30. They were coming on to rest at night, and this is where they also laid their eggs, and they had been doing that for generations before the tourists were there, before the whalers, before the Polynesians. And I started thinking, as I watched this with hundreds of other people behind this yellow caution tape and orange cones, that I am a guest here. And I thought to myself, if I use that to describe how I am in my relationship with the planet, that means everything. Because that tells me, as a guest, I am not here to change it significantly and mold it the way I want it to be, but I am there to pass that on and leave it the way I found it or better and pass it on to what comes next. So if I say to myself, I am a guest on the planet, not an owner of property, it's going to change how I view my backyard, how I view my community, and how I view nature. So that simple term, guest, will change how I see my place in this world. And it means that because I know my life has an ending. And I am not going to be here forever, so I am that guest, and I should treat the world as a guest. Second word, pilgrim. Probably not a word you use, right? I never used that word until about 12 years ago when Karen and I went on a trip with presidents and spouses from other Catholic colleges founded by the order, the Dominicans. We went to where St. Dominic was born 800 years ago in Spain. We went to where he studied and where he preached in France. And the trip was organized by the former president of Dominican University in Chicago, Sister Jean Murray, and she told us every morning, she'd remind us that we are not tourists. We're pilgrims. We're here as pilgrims. So what does it mean if you're a tourist? So if you're a tourist, you go and you have a checklist. So Eiffel Tower, check. Colosseum, check. At the Louvre, Venus de Milo, check. Mona Lisa, check. And oh yes, photos with each, selfies, check, check, and check. In fact, if you've been to see the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, how many people have seen that? There are more people that have their backs to the Mona Lisa than face it. because that's what they're doing, and they're not really looking at it, and you can't really get close enough to look at it anyway, but they're not looking at it, and they're not looking at the detail, the backdrop, the perspective that was used. They're not doing that because they're there as a tourist. A pilgrim, on the other hand, looks at things from the side. They stay and linger. The pilgrim's on a journey that's open-ended. There's a direction in mind, of course, but unlike the tourist who simply wants to get from here to there, the pilgrim is open to what you may find along the way. So if you say to yourself that word, that I'm a pilgrim, it will imply that you will do things differently. So as an example, let's just take a walk in the woods. So you can take a walk in the woods for exercise, and you go from point A to point B, but you don't really see or linger or let something that's happening seep into your bones and your mind and help change your perspective because you're there to get from point A to point B. But if you are a pilgrim and you walk in the woods, you will hear and smell and experience what is there. The arc of the canopy, the lichen on the trunk of the tree, the small sapling struggling to find the pine, to grow up and find light, and perhaps some thoughts of what these sights and sounds mean to you and what they say about who you are and your place in life. A pilgrim looks for moments to find insight. It's not the journey, it's the journey, not the destination. So, if you say to yourself that you are a pilgrim, it will remind you how to take and view the journey of life that we're each on. What we say matters. What we say to others and what we say to ourselves. So remember, we are but pilgrims on a journey, on a planet where we are guests, armed with the power of words that can shape reality. Okay, I think I'm supposed to introduce the song. All right, sorry, I was in my moment there. Okay, sorry. All right. So please join us in singing hymn 134, Our World is One World. So before I end the service, I just want to let you know that the walkways and the parking lots may be a little slippery. So just think of that as the frozen water that will tell us and remind us about the power of words, okay? And don't say any choice words if you slip a little bit, okay? All right. So I wanted to just end with another poem that I wrote just for this occasion. And I think we'll sing our farewell song first, and I'm going to do that while we extinguish the chalice, okay? So if you would want to sing our farewell song together, that would be great. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. So, just to sum up what we talked about today, I wrote a poem called What I Say Matters. Does water hold the key to understand reality? Frozen into shapes that can be fantastic and beautiful, or irregular malformations that are drab and dull? The act of speaking is so magical and powerful in itself, sending frequencies and vibrations out into space, landing and penetrating other people and place, impacting each other on a microscopic quantum level, changing the world like ripples in water from a pebble. What I say and how I say it, into that narrow space between two faces, forms a vibration of dissonance or harmonic melody that can change reality. Words have power, impacting others consciously and unconsciously. We can, by what we say, make the world beautiful and whole, or leave it torn and tattered. For what we say matters.